everyone, I'm Janine, and today I'm here with NDP candidate Keira Gunn, who is running in Confederation here in Calgary. And I thought it would be a really great idea to bring her into my house, so welcome. Thank you for joining me. And talk about some policy points that I think are really important for this election. So why don't you tell us actually a little bit about why you're running?
I just really want to make positive change. So I was a last minute candidate kind of in the 2021 election, and I got to thinking, what if I actually ran a real campaign? What if I actually got in a position where I was going to Ottawa and representing people? And I realized through some of the work that I'd done at the Student Association at the University of Calgary that I have a capacity to do that. I can actually read through the rules and figure out what can be done to use them in a way that actually benefits the people that you're supposed to represent. And I just figured I could bring that to Ottawa and I can represent the people here and do a good job for people.
Okay, so you have a PhD in math.
I do.
Now, money and math kind of like to go together a little bit, but I'm curious, if you could like wave a magic wand tomorrow, what are your kind of top couple policies that you are really passionate about and are really, I guess, excited about?
I think that the skills in math are really particular, and like I said, just being able to read through what's there and knowing how to use it. I really want to make a lot of politics more accessible to people, and I think we do have things that are very difficult to access or sometimes require massive amounts of money and lawyers to access them, and they're not really made for people anymore, and it's just too difficult. So that's something that's maybe a little niche to me. But at the same time, I think there's an avenue for healthcare, for example. I think we're seeing some problems in this province with healthcare and the way some of our money's being spent. And I think we can kind of go through and look through the legislation and how it's written and find ways to make the provinces be a lot more accountable to how our tax dollars are being spent.
Our new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, has obviously called this election kind of a couple of days after he was in power. I've been seeing a lot in the news of candidates, both in the Liberal and the Conservative Party, kind of dropping out. And I think a lot of that has come up on like things that they've said or done in the past. And I'm curious, it feels like nobody's really ready for this election. Even though like I feel like we kind of saw it coming, right? When Trudeau decided to step down, I think it was kind of inevitable that an election would be called. So do you have any insight on that?
I can't speak for some of the other parties. I can certainly say, the NDP was targeting some places in Calgary for 2 years, thinking that they need to start taking Calgary seriously and put in some real candidates who are going to put in the work. So I was contacted 2 years ago to do this and start laying the groundwork for a real campaign here. I was vetted. It was about a 2-month process, and it was fairly intensive. I had to take down a post of my cat because of a unsavory nickname that my old roommate once gave her that shouldn't be up on Facebook. So, it was a very intensive and personal process. At the time when the leadership race ended for the Liberal Party, the polls were saying a very different thing than they're saying right now. And Calgary, most of Alberta, looked like it was pretty certainly going to go a certain way. And so maybe some of the parties weren't taking it very seriously as far as who could potentially get elected here. To me, it's still important to make grounds, like even if it seems like it's a long shot, still really important to lay the groundwork. But I think that the Liberal Party really might have thought that there was not a shot here and maybe put in some candidates without doing the proper vetting. And like I said, very intensive process. And to me, like the vetting it's not just like, to make sure the reputation of the party doesn't get damaged. Like people getting elected to these positions of power, influence, and access, you need to make sure you're putting ethical people in those positions. It's really important, this work. You can't just like throw somebody in without making sure that that's a person that's going to make a decision.
Now, the Liberals have recently come out with a housing plan. I haven't read through all of it, but what is the NDP's view on housing? And is there a plan that they have that they would implement if elected?
Yeah, so I think recently some news was dropped about giving better mortgages for first-time buyers to make sure that a lot of the new builds that they're getting built, we see them built all around this neighborhood, making sure that it is going to be young people trying to get into the market to be able to have access to those homes, which is really important. I think that's what's really getting lost in the conversation, maybe from all parties, is renters. And we've seen rent skyrocket. I think Calgary was hit the hardest of any major city in Canada. And I think, it's always been a staple of the NDP's program to bring back a nationalized housing program like every other country has.
Yes.
So that to me is really important because renters are really getting left behind.
And the funny thing that maybe it's not funny. It's not actually that funny to me. But when I look at some of the NDP's policies, we don't actually have to look very far to see those policies enacted in other countries. Yeah. And so I think when people sometimes think that they're like so crazy and so like left leaning or socialist, I'm like, there are countries all over the world doing these things. It's not revolutionary. Like, I don't think the NDP are like reinventing the entire system in Canada. It's just we're pulling from great examples kind of around the world, I think.
Oh, and we used to do it in the early 90s, and it started getting dismantled throughout the governments throughout the 90s to the point where, our program isn't really doing a lot, particularly for lower income people at all. And so, people need homes, and one of the concerns I do have with a lot of the bills going and some of the plans being discussed right now is that we're throwing a lot of our tax dollars at building homes, and the government's going to build homes, procure land. This is our tax dollars, and we do need to make sure that those homes are not just going into the big bubble that exists right now, right? They're not just going to this market that's too out of price to reach.
Yeah, those luxury kind of homes, and on the other side of it, like condos, right? Like if we build a whole new condo building, but all of the units are $3,000 a month, that's not affordable either.
Yeah, exactly, right? We need to get back into public housing, publicly owned housing, because it's going to reduce the market drive at the bottom, which is going to find its way up and hopefully make things a lot more accessible for everybody.
Absolutely. So I feel like the NDP have not gotten enough credit in the past for some really, really great policies. So things like the dental care policy could not have been put through without the NDP. And I mean, provincially, that's another conversation. But I think, having dental care, having pharmacare, is so important for Canadians. And I'm wondering what you think needs to change in the NDP messaging for them to get more of the credit for some of these great programs that they've kind of helped implement.
I think we need to do a much better job of connecting with people, because I do think the Liberal Party's kind of trying to run away with credit for these plans. Even though these have been promises of that party for decades, as long as I remember, and I'm not as young as I look. And it only finally got through by having their hand forced by the NDP.
Totally.
We just need to be more aggressive and more proud of what we do. And I think it's maybe a bit of a problem on the left is we're just not vocal and loud enough about our accomplishments. And we really need to be. And we should be the party of hope and optimism, and what we've achieved through working with the Liberal Party over the last few years is a sign of hope and optimism and of a better future. And that's what we should be talking about, and just screaming from the tops of roofs. Look at what we can do, and we're willing to work with other parties. We're willing to get these awesome things done.
And it's so interesting because provincially, the NDP actually, the provincial NDP parties are in a lot of these provinces across Canada. So, and I think they do a good job or a decent job of taking credit for policies that they're pushing through on a provincial level. So I would love to see that on the federal level as well.
And I mean, I think a really big difference is that, on the provincial level, the NDPs have been the governments in power.
Yeah.
Federally, it hasn't happened, and maybe we do get to take a lot more credit when that finally does.
Yeah. Okay, so switching gears a little bit, I'm a mom of a 4-year-old, so I'm sure you can imagine there is a lot of negotiating that happens in this house. Yeah. But one thing that kind of I talk to a lot of my followers about and hear a lot from women is around EI. So EI is capped at about $2,700 a month, and that's for maternity leave. So right now, maternity leave kind of sits under this umbrella of employment insurance, and you need a specific number of hours to actually qualify for that. And to me, that is really putting women at risk financially when they're kind of at their most vulnerable, because they're not qualifying. Yeah. If they're entrepreneurs and they don't pay into EI, they also aren't qualifying. And for a lot of families, that is not going to cover the salary that they had. And so I'm curious, maybe your thoughts on kind of maybe moving maternity pay out of that EI umbrella, or increasing that amount, or mandating that it actually be a certain percentage of a woman's salary?
Yeah, it doesn't seem to make a ton of sense where it is right now. I've dealt with a lot of students at the University of Calgary, graduate students who are, they'll have some of their hours as employment, but a lot of their work and income comes from this sort of grant money that's associated to the work they do as a grad student, which is considered student work and therefore not labor work, and so it's not counting towards these hours. And I've had to sit and work with some of these students and try to calculate their hours to see if they'll actually even be eligible for the EI number threshold. It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It doesn't really seem like these things should come from the same pot at all.
No.
And
because you're still working when you're a parent on mat leave.
Exactly.
It's just not in the paid labor force.
Well, yeah, that's its own conversation.
Yeah,
I
totally.
Think. I was doing a little research before and found that about a year ago, actually, the NDP was working with some labor groups across the country to try to combat the fact that if you are on a parental leave and you get laid off, either during the leave or near the start or finish of it, you lose access to the EI on top of it because it's considered the same pot at that point. It just gets melded together. So the NDP has already been doing some work in this field to try to make improvements. Although it is kind of blanket, they have, I think it was yesterday or just very recently, proposed a policy to just increase EI in general.
Make it good.
Yeah, make it more accessible for workers in non-traditional settings, because we're expecting some hard times to come and we need people to still be able to pay their bills. But I do agree with you that having it in the same boat as the parental leave is really going to be a decentivizer for certain people to get in the workforce. And I think we kind of know what people are going to be impacted by that the most, right? It's going to be mostly women, basically. And so that's it's something that we should be looking towards. And again, other countries do this very differently than we do. We have models elsewhere that work and work much better, and that are maybe a lot more fair. And there's solutions out there, we can find them.
Absolutely. And I think, to your point, it disproportionately impacts women. And, if you've ever heard me talk, that's definitely one of the points that I bring up. But I think it also disincentivizes men from taking parental leave, because typically they're the higher income earner, and a family can't survive on that, I guess, diminished income. And then we get these wage gaps, and it is systemic, and you get dads that aren't involved and don't have good relationships with their kids. So it also hurts men not having those policies in place.
And it just perpetuates the same system again and again and again, right? The math checks out, right? If the proportion of that higher income earner getting reduced to, I think it's 55% right now on the
to a cap of 65.
Right. It's going to be a much bigger dent from the higher income earner. So it's going to be this self-sustaining thing of just keeping the father figure, the male in the workforce, and not really working for women.
Now, in 2015, Trudeau said that we would move to kind of proportional representation.
Oof.
I know, big last question here. And currently we have first past the post in place.
Yeah.
It's been 10 years, and he has, whatever you think of Trudeau and whatever you think of his father is here nor there. I'm curious what the NDP thinks about that, and what the strategy would be to get the Liberals on board with actually following through on that promise.
It's always been one of the primary policy points of the NDP to move to some form of proportional representation. A little bit of debate about which is going to be the preferable one, but I think mixed member proportional is ideal.
Can you just, in case someone doesn't know, can you just quickly explain what that is?
Okay, so I had some of my students do a presentation on this recently. So what you would do on a ballot is you would make two selections. You would choose the person that you want to represent you in the riding. So they would be affiliated with a party, typically, or they could be independent, but you're mostly looking for that to choose the person that you think is best, and not necessarily for the party that you most regularly identify with. People play that game in politics, but not the party that you want to win. And then the second choice you would make on that ballot is the party that you would like to see form the biggest government. But there will be a winner in that. that will be the person that gets the most votes. It might be a sliding vote where they might shift votes or something, but I believe that's not the case typically for a simple ballot. And then what they do is across that ballot, which is usually broken into, so for example, if we have a whole bunch of different ridings in Calgary, maybe 4 of them will get mashed together for this sort of conglomerate ballot, and then across that they will do the proportional thing where they assess of all the people in this big pile, they wanted 60% from party A, 40% from party B, and well, that leaves nobody else because I just added up to 100%. So
the math is mathing.
Yeah, I should have left a little window there, but I didn't. And so what they'll do is have other seats allotted with just sort of maybe some names that the parties have put forward that will make sure that of the party ballot, that is distributed proportionally so that you can still vote for the person you think is the best in there, even if they don't align with the party that you want. Or even like you just don't have to do the strategic vote.
That was my next
the strategic
question.
Vote.
Is there's all this talk about strategic voting, right? Like if we don't want a certain party to get in Confederation, like who should we vote for? If there's kind of 2 more left-leaning parties.
There's a lot of talk of that right now. So I've talked to so many people who like look at what I have to offer, look at my educational background, look at the work I've been doing in the community and the work I've been doing campaigning, and are coming out and saying like, you're so incredible, but I look at these polls over here and I believe I have to vote Liberal because I'm so scared of this or that or the other. And meanwhile, those polls that they're looking at are based on just big aggregated numbers. They're based mostly with some little bit of fine tuning on sort of the federal voting intentions. They might be regionalized to some extent. And then they sort of just impose that on the last election, 2021, for this riding. And we didn't really run a party or run a campaign in the last election in 2021. We had a candidate, we got a couple signs out, but it certainly wasn't like a 1.5-year campaign with fundraising, with an office and staff. We have the most signs out in the riding right now, right? We're out there, we're active, and it's not taking any of that into account. It's really just taking these 2 things without looking at any localized information. It's not looking at the fact that the Liberals only just got a candidate like 2 or 3 days ago.
Totally.
The change of the incumbent Conservative, he's no longer running, so we do have somebody else running. And that, all of these things change the local dynamics.
Totally.
And so
And I was just going to say, I think on the polls too, what people have to remember is, and I'm going to go millennial here for a second, and Gen Z, because I think I can speak for them as well, but like if someone's calling me to ask me a question about, like I'm definitely not picking up the phone if I don't know who the phone number is. So I would also feel that like it's very skewed, and it absolutely can be skewed towards maybe an older demographic that maybe is retired and is at home and can answer the phone. Like I don't know about you, but like if I do not know the phone number, like the call is not getting answered.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Same with me. I won't do it.
But
I think some of the polling is also done by, I think like online data, for example, online surveys and texts and
but again, who's more willing to fill those out? Like we get so many promotional emails these days, and then just generalizing here, but I don't know how accurate some of the poll data actually is.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, if all else was equal from this election to the 2021 one, it would probably be pretty rearenable. But so much has changed in this riding. So much has changed from how the NDP is approaching this riding. You can see it. You literally look out there. These aren't signs in public places. These are signs on people's lawns that have been asking well in advance of the election to get signs out, right? These are people that, when I got nominated in 2023, showed up because they were so excited to see somebody actually making a real go of it in this riding that I think doubled the last 4 years fundraising in 2 months.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible.
Yeah, right? This is, the NDP has a firm base in a lot of areas in Alberta. There's a history here. Absolutely. And they're immovable, and they're excited about the fact that there's a legitimate campaign happening here for the first time in, the last time we had a seat was some time ago.
Yeah.
But they're hyped and they're immovable. They're not gonna flip, and they're telling their friends, and we can see it out there. You like just look around the riding.
Okay, in closing,
all right,
anything you want to share with people? And obviously get out and vote. You have to vote. I mean, you don't you don't have to, but you should absolutely get out and vote. Actually, I'm going to say you have to vote. It's so important. But, you know, if there's one thing you wanted people to know about you and voting for you, what would it be?
I think that, like, to me, and I tell a lot of people this on the doors, representation is the most important thing. And, like, you know, you hear some folks saying no taxation without representation, and I believe it, right? You need to be represented, and if you're going to be represented, it's got to be somebody that comes out and meets you and speaks to you and can sympathize with you. It's got to be somebody that can understand your experiences, right? I'm a college instructor. I do not lead a glamorous lifestyle. I have experienced some rough patches in the past year with the economy. I lost my job. I struggled through that. I know what it's been like for people in Calgary for the last couple years. I've changed my behaviors to adjust to the increasing grocery prices like everybody else.
Yeah.
I know what people have been going through, and I'm also able to help solve these problems and articulate these problems back to Ottawa. And I think that's something that we've really been missing for quite some time. And so I think I'm the person that is going to get our voice heard in Ottawa.
And I think, you know, it was another personal finance creator that said this with the US election is politics is like a bus, and you want to get on the bus that's going in the direction that you believe in. And I think, and I love that analogy so much, because I think sometimes we get fussed about like one policy or one thing that we maybe don't agree with a party. But I think that that's such a good reminder that you want to vote for a party that is moving in the direction that you want to see the country going. And if you want it to be everything that you hoped or dreamed of, then that's like an Uber, and you absolutely then need to run as a candidate. And so in closing, I guess, I think that that's like a great place to leave it, is you want to vote for the party that's kind of moving Canada in the direction that we ultimately want it to go, and that's to support people at the end of the day.
Absolutely, right? People make the economy, and we can't ever forget that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.